Hello and welcome to AOTV. My name is Michael Cups, and I'm really excited about our guest today. We're going to talk about courage in the workplace, or cultures, courageous cultures, giving everybody a voice and innovation. I'm really excited to have our guest, whose name is Karin, and she's the CEO of Let's Grow Leaders. She has a couple books out there if you're interested. Courageous Cultures is one of them, which we're going to talk a lot about today, and Winning Well, A Manager's Guide to Getting Results Without Losing Your Soul, which is a fantastic subtitle, Karin. So Karin, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yes, it's exciting. So why don't we start with just an introduction of you? I know you did a decade or so at Verizon, maybe longer, and then just tell us about what a courageous culture is.
Okay, so I was actually at Verizon for 2 decades before founding Let's Grow Leaders, and I've been doing this for 10 years, which when you start to add up all those years, sounds like a lot of years. But courageous cultures. We were really curious in our work with clients all over the world. We were noticing a consistent pattern across a variety of industries. We would hear things like, talking to the senior level, why don't more people speak up? Why don't more people share their ideas? Yeah. Why am I the only one who has to go around and find these best practices? And then we would go into do training at the front line of the very same organizations, and we would hear things like, nobody wants my ideas. Last time I spoke up, I got in trouble. Nothing ever happens anyway, so why bother? Yeah. So that's why we got so curious about this, that sparked our research on courageous cultures and ultimately to our book and our tools.
That's fantastic. And I know you do seminars and public speaking and things like that, and coaching is probably the primary point of what you're doing with that courageous cultures, is helping other companies get there.
100%. Yeah. How do you create an environment where you have the psychological safety that lays the foundation for people to speak up and share their ideas, but also going out and practically asking for people for their ideas and encouraging that innovation at every level of your organization.
That's great. And so I think you know a little bit about ActiveOps, but I'll put it in perspective for our audience here. We implement software. And usually in its hundreds, if not thousands of people in offices like banks and insurance companies and healthcare companies and so on. And so we, in addition to the software, we implement something that follows agile methodologies. It's not necessarily for software development, but for operations, where they get new stand-ups and buzz meetings and one-on-ones, and there becomes part of a rhythm. So when you think about that, I mean, we are talking about change, and we hear this a lot from our customers. But how do leaders, should they prepare for change when it's that consistent or that big?
Yeah, well, first of all, I really admire the approach that you're using. It is such a solid methodology and so important. And when I think about preparing for change, one of the biggest mistakes that I see organizations do is the senior team is really working and thinking about this change. They've been thinking about it for a while. And so all the things seem to make completely logical sense, right? Like, well, there's a reason for this change. We know why we're going to do it. It's benefiting everyone. And because they've been in the planning stages of this, they underestimate how much it's going to take to bring people along, because the other folks have been busy, heads down, doing their work, really concentrating on servicing their clients, their customers, doing their daily work. And so you come with this change and then say, okay, now everybody do this thing. And people are catching up. Yeah. And that is what, really to break it down. And, everyone says, communicate why it's important. Yes. Creating real clarity about why you're doing a change makes sense. It also makes sense to say, here's where the end vision for what we're trying to accomplish here. And then breaking it down and not overwhelming everyone. So you can say, this is the vision, this is the path. And then for this week, this is what we're going to do. And really create real clarity down to for why we're asking you to do this thing, but also practically, what does success look like for one element of the change, and get people comfortable with that piece of it. And then you move to the next piece of it, because it can become very overwhelming. You say, oh, we're going to change everything. Now we're going to do stand-ups, and we're going to do this, and we're going to change this methodology and this technology. And that can be a lot. So I think the more you can break it down, let people know where you're headed and why, but then make it feel easy. Any incremental step that you're changing, make that feel easy, because confidence and competence comes from hey, I did this, it worked well, I
Yeah.
see the benefit, now I'm more open-minded to the next thing.
Yeah, that's great. So, one of the things that fascinates me about our customer base is we have individuals that have started in an operation like a loan operation or a medical claims
Yeah.
operation, and that's the only job they've had, and they may have had that job for a decade or 2 decades, and they may have been promoted several times but they're relatively doing the same job. So, what do you do because we hear it a lot, and I'm sure you do too? Is, well, this is the way we've always done it, and it works. So how do you address that kind of, I don't know if it's called a laggard mentality, but there's something that says, hey, I'm comfortable, leave me alone kind of thing?
Yeah, so very consistent with our research. And it's not just individual contributors who do the same job. So 67% of the participants in our Courageous Cultures research said their manager operates around the notion of this is the way that they've always done it. So that's an important place to start, knowing that, of course, if something has been working for me for a very long time, then why would I change it? Right. And so knowing that when people are comfortable, there needs to be a compelling reason. Why will my life be better around this? And so, one of the ways to think about that, again, is to be very, very specific and create a lot of clarity. So, when you go and say, well, what is one way we could do this more effectively? Or what is one problem that you are facing right now in your job that you wish were easier? If you can connect your solution to what people really care about in the current work that they're doing, because what I find with folks that have been working in a role for a very long time is that they are very committed to their clients. Yeah. They're very committed to the work that they're doing. There's a reason they've done that job for so long, and they really care deeply about it. Yeah. So you don't want to go in and say, now we have a better way. Instead, say, what is frustrating you about the way you're doing it now? And say, okay, will help with that solution.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I want to go back to something you said earlier about explaining a certain element of it and achieving that, and them feel good about and we get that. So as we go through our process, there's always an aha moment with somebody that was a naysayer before, and that's a celebration. That's a time to celebrate. I mean, do you have methods, or do you see that where you've taken somebody that was maybe on the sideline, but now they go, oh, I get it, and how do you bring them into the conversation?
Yeah, it's the best way to do it. Okay. Yeah. And so in chapter 6 of Courageous Cultures, we actually talk about a whole case study about how you take those early adopters, if you want to think about diffusion of innovation theory, but how do you really scale? So I would say a couple of things. First of all, when you say the people are having that aha moment, I'll use an example from Nestle. We have been doing a lot of work with them on building what they call a care and dare culture in Switzerland. And it's really Courageous Cultures. They asked us to take our Courageous Cultures tools and techniques and adopt them to their 4 care values and their 4 dare values. Well, as you've been doing this, and as you can imagine, that Nestle is an organization that has a lot of solid infrastructure and things they've been doing for a long time. So who are the people that are seeing these innovation and these new techniques, and who are taking appropriate risks and highlighting that and understanding why it's working for them, and really tapping in to say, okay, why did you choose to do this technique? Why is this working for you? And then help them think about, how can we scale this to really help become part of the change agents of the process, when you think about it that way? The other thing that I would say about when you are scaling is that it's not going to work exactly the same in every market or any particular customer base, and to be sensitive to that. So you may have a very structured technique and technology that you're planning to use. And if that's what you're going to use, then how will this work and give people some choices about the way that they're implementing it. Yeah. When I was thinking about my work, I led a 2,200 person sales team at Verizon, and we were implementing a pretty significant change. Well, the way the change worked in our Washington, D.C. stores was very different than in Cedar Bluff, Virginia. And if I had just gone in and said, well, we're having a lot of success in DC, everybody should do it this way. Yeah. you're not going to have credibility. So instead you say, well, hey, we've had a lot of success in DC. What is it about that success that we need to think about? How do we modify it? How could it work here? And give people a voice in that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it goes back to a question I wanted to ask you. A lot of times what we do, we enhance visibility in an enterprise, right? So there's more visibility, and that includes individual performance visibility sometimes. And so how do you address that? Because some people might feel like, oh, you're just finding new ways to measure me, and that's just to put the whip to me or whatever it may be, to do work harder, do more and stuff like that. But the reality is that visibility can also lead to good outcomes that are, you get to spend more time doing training or something like that. But so how do you address that fear of, oh, you're just trying to measure me more?
So in Winning Well, we talk about focus on the game, not the score. And one of the challenges that you have when you increase visibility is that sometimes if you do not train your managers well, they start talking about the numbers instead of the behaviors to get to the numbers, right? So, hey, look, that other team, they're at 95. We need to get to 95. Why aren't we at 95? How long is it going to take to us till we can get to 95? And so people get frantic, and you'll then start seeing gaming behaviors, because if you're all about the number, then people are going to get to that number in any way they can. And often what happens is now you have the whack-a-mole where one metric will get better and other metrics will go down. And so instead of, I really like to focus with leaders to say, okay, yes, we've got visibility. We now need to improve the number. And when you are talking to your people, spend more time talking about the behaviors. What are the actions? What are the habits? What are the techniques that they need to be doing to change that behavior, to change the number? And then the number is more of your dashboard and your indicator of whether the behaviors are happening. And that is one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make, is that once they get visibility, then they're talking about the number instead of talking about the behavior. So that's the first thing. And then the second is, why do those numbers matter? Like, what are those indicators about? And, this number matters because it is an indicator of our customer experience. This number matters because it is an indicator of our financial health, whatever it is, and explaining the why you're using those numbers. Because other than that, dashboards can feel scary to people.
Yeah, I think there's a great response. We've got, we see implementations, and we do see some managers or cultures focus on the numbers. And then we see, we've got a really good example of a very large health plan that has created an environment that's safe and people feel in control, and their attrition rate is by far less than any other organization we see, because everybody feels like they're part of it, right? And it's a kind of a magical kind of scene there.
Yeah, Dr. Amy Edmondson of Harvard is really considered to be the pioneer of psychological safety, and she wrote the foreword to our book. And one of the things that got her so interested in this concept of psychological safety is when she was doing research with teams, she found that the highest performing teams in a healthcare organization, that this research were making more mistakes. Well, wait a minute. What is? She's like, wait, why? How could be the highest performing teams be making more mistakes? But what was happening was the higher performing teams were reporting more mistakes, and so they were catching the mistakes earlier before, and they were able to then implement fixes in order to make things better in the long run. And so if that's the mentality you use with a scoreboard, right? And you could say, something is not right here, and create an environment that makes it feel safe for people to talk about what could be off here. Early in the game, you're going to have longer term, more lasting high performance.
That's a great way to wrap that up. That was perfect. I enjoyed that, and I agree with that 100%. So I want to move on to talk a little bit about ideation. I read some of your stuff, and we talked a little bit about it. I'm a big ideation fan. I love the way you approach it. But can you share with us about how you engage teams to take an innovation culture?
Yeah. So in courageous cultures, we have a 7-step process, but I want to just talk about the first 4 because these 4 ways can be done at any level, whether you are a supervisor, running a small team, or whether you are a CEO. And, it really starts by creating an environment of psychological safety. And what I mean here is if you've got any shame, blame, intimidation, Me Too stuff going on, you cannot go to a team and say, hey, I really want your ideas. Yeah.
Right.
And it also starts with navigating your narrative, is what we call navigating your narrative, which is how safe do you feel speaking up? Because if you go to your team and say, yeah, I really do want your ideas. It's, how do we improve this? How do we make this better? But they watch you. Yep. And you're not advocating for ideas. You're not willing to experiment. You're not willing to partner with peers to try to think of ways to do things differently. They're going to follow your lead. So that all falls into that really laying the groundwork. And then from there, it's really starts with creating clarity. And it's clarity around 2 things. One, clarity that you really do want people's ideas, but clarity about what a good idea would accomplish. It was really interesting when we started implementing these tools that we had built to help people ideate. We experimented with a couple of ways. One where we said, hey, here's some tools, bring us any ideas that you think would make things better around here. Yeah. And in other scenarios, we said, here is an area of the business we absolutely need a strategic idea, and then use the same tools. When we could create real clarity about where we needed great ideas, it was amazing the percentage of ideas that were implemented because we had clarity about where we need an idea and clarity around the parameters of what success looked like. But when you're too general, you're going to end up with lots and lots of ideas, but not necessarily ideas that are going to be implemented. Yep. Yep. And if you want to create psychological safety where people feel safe and encouraged to share ideas, one of the best ways to do that is by using the ideas that they bring up. Yep. So the more clarity you can have about what success looks like, the better ideas you're going to get. The better ideas you're going to get, the more ideas you're going to implement.
Yep.
Yeah. So you have this virtuous cycle. So psychological safety, yep, creating clarity, and then cultivating curiosity. And in this, we talk about you need more than an open door.
Yeah.
Because the problem is for most people, it takes some level of courage to walk through an open door. 40% of the people in our Courageous Cultures research said they don't have the confidence to share their ideas. So when you want to proactively ask, it's one of the things we found is be very specific. Like, what's one way we could improve the productivity of this process? What's one way we could increase people's well-being while they're working from home? And when you ask for one way, what's one way I could improve my leadership?
Yeah.
Because when you can be very specific, that also reduces the friction. Because, all right, I can think of one way that you could be a better leader. But if you say, is there anything I can do to improve my leadership? People are more likely to say, you're doing just fine. Because where do I start?
Yeah.
And then the final is responding with regard. This is how do you respond to an idea, even if it's an idea that you can't possibly use.
Yeah.
And responding with regard looks like gratitude, not necessarily gratitude for the exact idea, but gratitude for the act of contributing.
Yep.
Information about how you're going to use the idea, and then an invitation, or not use the idea and why, and then an invitation to continue to contribute more.
Yeah.
And it's that gratitude, information, and invitation. So say you bring me an idea and it's going to take us in this strategic direction. But that's not where we're headed. We're headed in this strategic direction. So you could say, hey, thank you so much for caring so deeply about our business. I really love your thought process here. Thank you. Here's the thing. Your idea would take us over here. Where we're headed in the next 6 months is in this direction. So I would love to have any ideas that you may have of what we could do better to go in this direction. And so you are now redirecting them, but I still feel safe and encouraged to share ideas.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great summary of it. And you brought something up there that I'm curious about your take on this. In operations, there was a few years ago, there was this massive push to put in automation. So RPA, if you're familiar with robotic process automation.
Oh.
Well, in our business, it was usually the operations people doing things and IT looking for places to put in automation. And they weren't necessarily integrated teams. They were kind of cross-functional teams. Mm-hmm. And it met with some level of success, but not as much as they were predicting, because it seemed like they weren't connected. And then that when they would go in and try to analyze where they could automate, they were just putting somebody under a microscope trying to figure out every click and then replicating that, right? And so, but how do you fix that? Because IT thinks that way. They think about a code, a run, that you have to apply. But how do you get cross-functional teams doing the same thing?
Yeah, so I would put them in a room, some semblance, right? You're not going to put everybody in a room together, but can you bring a cross-functional team together to do this? And we spend a lot of time, we'll do our idea innovation challenges where we'll say, here's the business problem we're trying to solve. And then you bring cross-functional people together. And one of the processes we use is what we call our own the ugly process. What are we underestimating about this?
Yep.
G, what's got to go? L, where are we losing? And Y, where are we missing the yes? And if you could start, talking at a very high level about that, it's amazing how fast, just did this yesterday in West Virginia, just how fast the bigger issues surface. Now, you may not be able to solve for all those problems, but it's better to have them in the room.
Yep.
And then from there, you say, okay, so here's where we're headed. How can we? And now you get people then focusing on solutions that are, very specific around the parameters.
Yeah.
Because nobody likes to have things done to them.
Right.
And there's always this feeling like, God, what are they thinking? Why? They have no idea. And so if you can get people involved in collaborating as early in the process, now you may not be able to solve for all the things. And that's the reason I think people don't. They're like, I don't really want everybody's input. That's too many cooks in this situation.
Yeah.
But if you are clear about what has to happen, what are the parameters, most people can accept a solution that's not 100% what they would have created themselves. Mm-hmm. If they understand and are part of the process and understand what's going on up front.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. It's interesting because there's going to be a ton of opportunities in the next year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever it is, with all the GPT and AI stuff, because it's going to be such an impact to everybody. And people may think it's a technology-led thing, but really you can find practical uses easily for everybody, whether they're customer service reps or they're claims adjusters or they're salespeople, et cetera. It's just amazing what that's going to do over the next few years, isn't it?
Fascinating, and I think in that part of that will be, what are the parameters? So because you don't want everyone off in the wild, wild west with it either.
Yeah.
And so I think embracing the possibilities of the automation and also training people in what is okay and what is not okay, I think will be very, very critical as well.
Yeah. That's great. Well, one last question for you, and then we can talk a little bit about your books and your services. So again, I'll go back to our customer base. We deal with customers that have thousands of people doing certain tasks, and they may be doing certain tasks. And what we see is our customers adopt by that group, that 200 people implements it, and then another 150 people do it, and another, maybe 500 people do it. But we see our COOs saying, I see the benefits of this. How do I do it across 7,000 people today? So how would you address the scale question? I mean, because it does present different problems. You said earlier that if the leader says do it, it doesn't always trickle down to the right feelings and motivation. So how do you handle scale like that?
Yeah, I mean, the best way to handle scale like that is to start at the top and really integrate your senior team first and get them, really understanding the change. One of the things we talk about is 5x5 communication and culture change. If something is strategically important, how do you communicate it 5 times, 5 different ways? Making sure those folks are all bought in on why you're doing it and have input into how it will work for the organization. Because if at that level, you've got people who are saying that will never work.
Yeah.
And then but they're not but they don't feel safe to say that out loud. And so they're nodding and saying, yeah, sure, I'll do that in my organization. Yeah. If they're not really deeply committed and don't have a tactical, practical plan to make that happen, I think you're going to it won't work. So that would be the first thing that I would say. And also, what are the nuances? We call this practicing the principle of, how do you make sure that you're adapting the way the rollout is going and understanding what is different in these organizations? Because a cookie cutter approach is probably not going to work. So it's better to make people feel safe and have input on how that will work. And then I would say the other thing, and we spend a lot of time doing this, working with organizations on this, is what are the HR and other infrastructure changes that need to be made to make things, to create consistency? Yeah. Because if you say, hey, we really want people's ideas, we really want innovation, we really want people to do, it is safe to make mistakes, whatever you're trying to accomplish, but your performance management systems or your rewards and recognition systems or who you put in succession planning is the opposite of that, you are going to sabotage any of the results that you're trying to do. Yeah, that's interesting. And you said 5 by 5, right? So it's what's you wouldn't know this, but in our core system, when we talk about the health of operations, we have fly by 5, and that's what everybody sees are those 5 things when they log into the system, because we think it's the health of the operation matters. So it's interesting you have a 5 by 5. That's fun connection. Well, very good. So so tell us a little bit more about how the people would find you if they want to talk with you further about your services. Yeah, so our company is called Let's Grow Leaders. And so certainly you can find us on our webpage there. And I love to connect with people on LinkedIn. I run a show called Asking for a Friend. So if you have any leadership culture questions, send them my way. And who knows, they might be a topic on the next Asking for a Friend as well. And our latest book is called Courageous Cultures. And we have a new book coming out this spring on powerful phrases for dealing with workplace conflict. Yeah, that's a great one. It's a great name too. Yes. So when is that? You said that's coming out this spring? That's coming out in May. In May. Okay. Very good. And the Courageous Cultures is available, I'm sure, on Amazon or your website, anywhere they want to get it, as well as Winning Well. Yeah, anywhere books are sold. Now, is Winning Well is also associated with some charity work you do? Is that right? Oh, yes. So thank you for asking. So yes, we have a philanthropic initiative called Winning Wells. And based on the book, but basically we build clean water wells for the people of Cambodia. And we do this in honor of our clients. So if someone does a big training program with us or a keynote, instead of writing them a thank you note, we build a clean water well in Cambodia. Had an opportunity to visit some of those wells, which was amazing, and some of the families, and what it can do for the health, for the financial viability. Just a little bit of clean water can make a really big difference. So far we have 156 wells in the ground. So. Wow. That's fantastic. Good work. Thank you. And that's just, it is a great cause. Thank you. So if they want to find you, go to Let's Grow Leaders. For those of you that want to learn more about ActiveOps, go to activeops.com. We have all of our resources online there. You can also find us on YouTube at AOTV for ActiveOps. We appreciate everybody joining us. Karin, thank you so much for joining us. And do you want to at least introduce your friend behind you? Oh, yeah. So these are this is one of our Courage Alliance. So we are consistently talking about practical ways to be more daring. And this one, you can't quite see it, but there's an incubator, a test tube with little light bulbs in it. So this is our Be Willing to Experiment line. That's great. Well, it's nice to have somebody in your office with you sometimes, right? Somebody to chat with. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, great to see you, Karin. Thank you so much for visiting with us. Great content, a lot to learn, and look forward to seeing you soon.